Hello. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leonardo Games, Tax Supervisor in Monterrey office of GL Del Rio. And with me is also Mariel Gracia, who is also a Tax Supervisor in GL Del Rio in Guadalajara office. So this day we will be talking about a very important and popular subject that sometimes has caused a headache between the taxpayers in Mexico during the last couple of months. In this case, we're talking about the new regulations on the electronic accounting. So on behalf of Team GL Del Rio, we want to give you a warm welcome. Basically, the way we will manage this webcast is that Mariel and I will be explaining the presentation that we have prepared for you. Then you can submit your questions in the assigned panel that you have in the presentation. And at the end, we will leave some time for question and answers. The time that we have assigned for a Q&A session is for around 10 to 15 minutes. So we might not be able to answer all of the questions during the webcast, but make sure. Okay, so basically we have been talking a lot about electronic accounting for the last couple of months. Everything started around first of 2014, then around in Federal Tax Code, Article 28, it established the regulations and it established the obligation for taxpayers to comply with electronic accounting. However, the rules had not been published at that time, but they mentioned that the rules would be published in the miscellaneous tax resolutions. Therefore, in July 2014, the second miscellaneous tax resolution took place, which was applicable as of July 7, and later on, in July 11, there was published the Exhibit 24. This Exhibit 24, it's the publisher that the government issued, which contains the specification for the electronic accounting. Basically established back then what was considered chart of accounts, what was considered a grouping code of the government, what is for trial balance, and the information of the journal entries. So this is a little of history for 2014. So now in 2015, what is new? Well, we have that the miscellaneous tax resolution for 2015 was published on December 30th. Then the new Exhibit 24 was released by January 5th, which, if you remember, it is the file that contains the specifications for the IT department, so they could develop the electronic reports to send to the government. This is the Exhibit 24. And we will be talking and discussing about this Exhibit 24, the requirements, the changes, so that we can comply with electronic accounting nowadays. Well, we can say, why so many publications or changes in both reports if they had already been issued in the past and contain the rules for electronic accounting? Well, the reason is because they have been adapting to various suggestions of the taxpayers and of the needs of them. For example, at the beginning, the chart of accounts of that the government published contained around 280 accounts. And then some of the accounts that were missing and were very important were like payroll, royalties, and some other payroll and interesting accounts that were needed at that time. So for this reason, the government realizes that the information that they had published needs to be updated to the actual needs, and therefore they made a few modifications. So with this said, we can expect in the miscellaneous tax resolution and in the new Exhibit 24 of year 2015 a few changes. Those changes will be the subject for our conversation today. Well, we wanted to put this slide just to show you a recent statistic related to the taxpayers obligated to file electronic accounting. For year 2015, the number of taxpayers who are obligated to comply with this obligation, it's for 203,000 taxpayers. So why do we say that it's a gradual compliance? Well, we say this because recently the government gave an extension for some taxpayers to comply with electronic accounting starting from January 2016 and not to be obligated to file electronic accounting in 2015. However, there is a few taxpayers or a specific group that can be allocated in this scenario. So these taxpayers are the ones who were registered before the tax authorities within the year 2014 and 2015. If your client, or if in this case, if the taxpayers were registered in these years, you are not obligated to comply with electronic accounting in year 2015, but until 2016. Additionally, some of these taxpayers are the ones with revenues less than 4 million pesos in year 2013, in year 2013. And also the taxpayers of special regimes, for example, professional services, lease of goods, and incorporation regime, which is a small regime with revenues less than 2 million pesos in Mexico. So basically, these taxpayers will not have to comply with the sending of electronic accounting to the government in year 2015, but until January 2016. Additionally, these other taxpayers will not be obligated to comply with electronic accounting. Which ones? Well, in the first place, we found that the government, which is a funny thing in here, the federation basically example, in this case, if the government institutions performs economic activities such as commercial, industrial, agriculture, any other activities not related to the service that the government should provide for free, basically these activities will not be proper of the government, and therefore they would need to comply with the electronic account. So in here, we have already discussed a few backgrounds for the electronic accounting nowadays. And now Maria will be talking a little bit with us about Exhibit 24.
Yeah, thank you very much for your insights, Leo. As my partner already explained, new Exhibit 24 was already published on January 5th of the current year. So in this case, what is the main difference found between the last Exhibit 24 and this new Exhibit 24? Well, the main difference here is that the tax authorities broaden and contemplate even more elements. As Leonardo already explained, in the prior year, we only had 4 concepts, all the way from the chart of accounts, the SATS grouping code, the trial balance, and the journal entries. And in this specific hearing year, we're gonna look at 10 elements. First of all, I'm just gonna start listing them, and later on, we're going to specifically describe each one. In this case, we have the chart of accounts used in the period, the SAT grouping code, our trial balance sent on a monthly basis, the information of the journal entries for the period with each of the requirements that should be complied through tax authority. SAT mailbox, information of journal entries for tax numbers assigned to tax receipts within the ledgers, and as well the information of journal entries for ledger level and or the first sub-account level. Additionally, we contemplate the electronic accounts and digital seal, which is an option, a very attractive option that tax authorities also offer us. As well, we have the currency list, the bank list, and the payment methods list, along with the chart of accounts that my partner is going to explain in a more detailed manner.
Thank you, Mariel. So, in general terms, that's what we can see. What Mariel just mentioned, it is what we can see in Exhibit 24 for year 2015. It is worth to mention that some of the information that Mariel just mentioned had not been considered in Exhibit 24 of year 2014. However, this doesn't mean that are new rules or new information, because the government had published this information in various other bulletins, for example, in miscellaneous tax resolution. So for this year 2015, what they did is to comply or gather all that information and put it together in Exhibit 24. So in terms of the chart of accounts, what we can find in this Exhibit 24? Well, the chart of accounts published by the government in this Exhibit 24 still contains 2 levels of accounts. First one, a major account, and another sub-account. An example of this would be that we can consider as major account or first level account banks, for example. And then a sub-account would be domestic banks or foreign banks. That would be what we mean by first and second level account. So it is something that is specified and established in Exhibit 24. Additionally, this is some of the changes, and it's a big one related to the chart of accounts. In the first chart of account that was published by the government around 2014, it was in July, if I'm correct, the number of accounts were for around 280 accounts. So now the new chart of accounts of the government that they publish contains around 1,100 of these accounts. So what are some of these new accounts that they included in this new Exhibit 24 and had not been included in the past? Well, for example, they included all the ones related to payroll. For example, salaries, extra time, vacations, and they also detailed them by center, by cost center. For example, administrative expenses, sale expenses. This is the reason why there are so many accounts. Most of them are repeated in the administrative expenses. We can find that salaries allocated in the administrative expenses account. Extra time as well in the administrative expenses account. But later on, we have another cost center, which is sales expenses, that contains the same accounts: salaries, extra time, vacation, etc. So this is a reason why one of the reasons why the chart of accounts grew so much. So in terms of the chart of accounts, if someone wants to have the one that it's up to date, the one that published by the government, please send us an email and we will be glad to send it to you so you have it. Additionally, it's important to mention that each company can have the chart of accounts that they decide according to their needs, with many accounts as you decide. However, the government wants the taxpayers to use a standard one that they have created and request you to group the chart of accounts into the one published in Exhibit 24. So when we read in this Exhibit 24 that there is a specific chart of accounts that the government wants you to use, it doesn't mean that you have to change all your chart of accounts that you have already. No, it means that you can still use your chart of accounts, but when you send it to the government, you will have to allocate all of the accounts that you have in your chart according to the chart of accounts given by the government. So, what we can tell in terms of association? Well, in this case, the government still relies on the judgment of the taxpayers, so they can allocate each account of their chart of accounts in the one provided by the government. So the government relies on us. However, and we just want to emphasize in here, we need to make a very conscious decision on where to allocate our accounts. Because we need to remember that this chart of accounts will be sent to the government, and it's very likely that they will review the type of transactions that we have in base of the information that we provide. For example, if we pay salaries, vacations, vacation premium, and we allocate all these expenses as salaries, then the annual tax return of each individual employee might not match versus the total expenses registered by the company because we allocated in a different account. And later on, for this situation, the company could be subject to a review for the government. For this reason, we want to emphasize that it's very important that even when the government relies on us, we need to make sure that we make a good allocation of our accounts.
Yeah, just extending your comment, Leo, just letting you know that it is very important for you to keep in mind that the chart of accounts must be sent in a group way. But, however, the trial balance needs to be sent in a non-group way.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. The following slides only clarifies that the government will not consider as ledger or first level account the following, which are, for example, assets, short-term assets, long-term assets, liabilities, stockholders, capital stock, revenues, costs, expenses, transfer account. Why is that? Well, because it could come the case that someone groups as first level the assets account, and later on they want to group as second level banks in general terms. Instead of using banks as first level, and then on a second level, national banks and foreign banks. So we believe that this is the reason why the government wanted to avoid this type of association. Basically, the government wants to be able to see on a reasonable level your accounting information. Not very detailed as if it were for level 3rd or 4th level, but not from the top as if you only allocate or group everything as an asset or liability account. Well, this slide shows the frequency in which the taxpayers needs to send their chart of accounts information. For example, the first time when the trial balance is submitted or when there is any change, we need to consider that if we make any change to our trial balance on a first or second level, we need to submit again our chart of accounts in order to have the most updated one with the government. However, we do not need to confuse that not for the mere reason that you add a one account, you need to send again to the government. For example, if we had set up that clients would be our first level account, On a second level account, we will have domestic clients. And on a third level account, we would have name of your client, whatever name you have. If you add or you start selling to a new client, this means that you will add another third level account. Well, this doesn't mean that you have to send again your chart of accounts to the government because you didn't change your first or second level account. This is very important just to keep in mind to avoid start sending to the government this information or to avoid freaking out about adding a new account. Just if we change the first or second level account, we will need to resend again our chart of accounts. Additionally, the information taxpayers listed on the Mexican Stock Exchange should be sent on a quarterly basis. And this chart of account is not applicable for some specific regimes, such as the one we already mentioned, which is like lease, professional service, tax incorporation regime, and some others. And there is these options to file or chart of account through an authorized third party known as invoicing aids.
It is also important to mention here, Leo, that the authorities are certain that these invoicing aids are really helpful because they have all the infrastructure requirements and they really are more like into this specific topic. So that will be a very helpful way for taxpayers to use.
Thank you, Mariel. So what are some other considerations that we have to have in the radar? Well, when the chart of accounts is modified, it shall be sent no later than the expiration of the obligation to submit the trial balance for the month when the change was carried out. This is obvious. I mean, if we make a change in our chart of accounts before we send the trial balance, which will contain this new account, we need to send first our chart of accounts and then the trial balance of the month.
Okay, thank you very much, Leo. Well, as we already mentioned, both chart of accounts and trial balances need to be sent to tax authorities through the tax mailbox, which is the new notification mechanism. And in this case, we have different timings or delivery timeframes for each obligation. But who are the taxpayers who need to send this on January of this current year? Well, first of all, we have the taxpayers belonging to the financial system. And as well, and as my partner already mentioned, all the taxpayers with revenues in the prior year greater than or equal to 4 million pesos. So it is very important for you to know or keep in mind that our base here is the revenues for 2013, not 2014, okay? And then we have our next time frame, which is January of the next fiscal year. We have more taxpayers here that are going to comply with this obligation, starting all the way from the taxpayers with revenues less than 4 million pesos, and then those belonging to the primary sector and nonprofit organizations, as well as those taxpayers that have already registered on the Federal Taxpayers Registry during last year or this current year. And then what happens with those taxpayers that will register on the next following year? Well, they need to send this chart of accounts and trial balances on the first day of the month, following the month when they were registered on the Federal Taxpayers Registry. Moving on to the terms for submitting this to documents. We have different terms for legal entities and for individuals. Well, how is this information going to be sent? For example, companies have no later than the first 3 days of the second month following the month the information corresponds to. And individuals have a similar treatment, but they have 2 days additional. So for example, what is going to happen if we want to send, let's see, what is going to happen to those taxpayers receiving 4.5 million revenues in last year? Well, starting from this information, we know that this revenue is greater than 4 million pesos. Or the major advantage here. The major advantage here is that it will provide taxpayers with a certainty and security that the information is properly sent. And as well, it will be received and properly validated through tax authorities. So we really need to keep this in mind and figure out if tax authorities will subsequently launch a new tax provision. Explain us a little bit more about this possibility of placing the seal on the file. As well, tax authorities are very precise in this new Exhibit 24 because they identify the characteristics of the delivery of the chart of accounts. So every time we send on a monthly basis our chart of accounts or on every modification made, we need to fully comply with this extension or denomination for each corresponding file. So this configuration includes 5 different elements all the way from the tax ID number, the year, the period, the key, and the extension. And as many of you may know, the tax ID number has 12 or 13 characters, depending or not if they constitute individuals or legal entities. In this specific case, we have 12 characters for legal entities and 13 characters for individuals. And then we have the 4 corresponding characters for the year in which the information is going to be sent. And subsequently, we have the 2 next characters for the month for the information submitted. And then we have the key. The specific key for the chart of accounts is the CT. And it is really important also to notice that all the files sent through text mailbox need to be compressed files. But you really don't need to worry about this specific point. Why? Because most of the electronic accounting systems already are capable of generating these extensions. So the important here thing is like to approach your IT department and discuss this with them, because that will automatically be generated by the system. And accordingly, we have the characteristics of how this extension would be.
Well, first, it's important to remember that the trial balance that is requested by the government will need to be detailed by the beginning balance as well as the transaction of the months, the debits and credit, and at the end it should contain the final balance. So, additionally, it's important to take into consideration that the accounts needs to show the taxes receivable and payables, as well the effectively charged transfer taxes and the effectively paid creditable taxes, as well as the revenue accounts. They shall distinguish the different rates, fees, and activities from which tax is not to be paid. And this is very, very important because sometimes we are used to recognize revenues, for example, in just one account, which is named as a service revenue account or something. So the government wants to be able to see the taxes, the tax rates that you have for each operations, as well as the tax receivables, payables, VAT, creditable, payable, or even when we have exempt activities. That is, in a summary, what we can say about this new Exhibit 24 in terms of the trial balance.
And nowadays, it is important to note that we have up to 38 revenue accounts. So now we already have the idea of how tax authorities are moving on and how they are handling this new accounting requirements subject.
Right. It is a good point, Mariel. Thank you very much. So this slide here only mentions the possibility of the taxpayers of sending the trial balance information, and there are two ways to do it. The first one, or when you send it, the first one will be considered as a regular information. The government will consider that that first report is sent on a regular or normal information. Additionally, later on, if you provide or if you make any change to your trial balance, that would be considered an amended or complementary information. And this information sent on a second, third, or any other occasions in the future automatically substitutes the previous information that you sent. So it is very important to send it as regular information the first time, and then if you're going to make any changes, those will be considered as complementary information. Okay, just like Mariel was mentioning, in this case, this slide only shows the specification of how the XML file that will be sent to the government needs to be named as submitted. And again, it contains the 5 elements, which the ones for thin are basically the tax ID. Then we have the year, the period, which should be comprehended by 2 characters. Then the key, which in terms of trial balance, we need to name it BN in case we send it the first time, or BC when we send it on a second or third time, like a complementary balance. And at the end, the extension, which is a zip file. So at the end, remember that one requirement of the electronic accounting, just like Mariel was mentioning, and you should not be worried, is that your system should be able to provide these reports in an automatic way. So if your IT department or the software that you use makes the right setup for the file, then you would just only need to do it like one click, and the file to the government should look like this. This is how the file should look. So one again, it is the same standard for each file. The only change is the one that says key, which will differentiate trial balance from chart of accounts, from journal entries, from the other reports of the accounting. But at the beginning, we have the tax ID, the year, the period, and at the end, we will have our file name just as it is shown right now on the screen. So, what is the term that we have for deliver the trial balance? For legal entities, we have a time frame no later than the first 3 days of the second month after the month of the information corresponds to. And in case of individual taxpayers, the day is up to 5 days. So, with this said, in a summary, we can say that for legal entities, or information of January 2015 needs to be submitted to the government by March 3rd. And for individual taxpayers, the information of January should be sent to the government by March 5th. We have to be very aware of these due dates to send our accounting information, because if we don't do it on time, the companies or the taxpayers could be subject to penalties and fines. So one more thing in particular regarding the trial balance It's that regardless the sending of the monthly trial balance, after you have finished your annual tax return, which for legal entities is March 31st and for individual taxpayers is April 30, both taxpayers, individuals and legal entities will send an annual balance on the following date. For legal entities, it is no later than April 20 of the year following that correspond the fiscal year. And for individuals, it's day 22. Basically, this trial balance will contain the adjustments originated because of the year end. We can find in here, for example, like corporate tax registrations in P&L, liabilities, and some other similar like this.
Yeah, Leo, and as well, this trial balance is better known as trial balance number 13 because, as you already know, we have to be sending 12 monthly trial balances and this last annual balance. And once again, for this year, Exhibit 24 establishes very specific requirements contained on journal entries, which vary all the way from distinguishing the tax folios from the tax receipts of the supporting documentation. In this specific case, tax folios are also referred as UUID, which I will explain later on. And then we also need to identify the payment method, because in this new Exhibit 24, there are a lot of payment methods in comparison to last year, which I will also explain in detail. And as well, these payment methods should also include the contributions, the rates, and the fees, including the operation, acts, or activities for which contributions not be paid pursuant to the corresponding operation, act, or activity. And as a third point, we have to involve all the operations with third parties and, of course, record or register the tax ID number of this third party in order for tax authorities to start tying up the amounts and use them for further reviews or any other use they will need. And last but not least, we need to identify the tax folios assigned to every tax receipt that we use for supporting documentations of the journal entries. But in this specific case, let's pretend we're going to register a payroll of 300 employees. What happens if your accounting system is not able to link all of those 300 folios for each employee receipt? Well, it's very easy, because in this case, tax authorities provide us the facility of having or issuing an auxiliary report, okay? We can have this auxiliary report on a separate Excel spreadsheet, but it has to be on an XML file, okay? And it also has to include all the tax folios, the tax ID keys, and as well as the amount per each transaction used. Another important and very transcendental point here is that tax authorities will be requiring information about 4 specific assumptions. In this specific case, we have an Indirect Investigation Act with the AF. We have the investigation documents, FC, refunds for DE, and the offset for CO. The first case is a very direct investigation, as we may already know, and the second case is used whenever said authorities want to match or tie up amounts with third parties. And then we have the refunds and the offsets. For this case, it is very important to know that the files must be sent under those terminations. If said authorities are requiring information of specific refund or of a VAT balance in favor, you need to be sending those journal entries and that information under those terms. Okay, and we're talking about the UUID in the journal on the accrual or the payment charge. Well, first of all, what is a UUID? A UUID is better known as a universally unique identifier, and it has 32 alphanumerical digits found in electronic invoices. These digits are a group of 5 digits separated by a hyphen, and they sum up to 32 digits. So what is going to happen if we have an accrual and later on start making the payment or the charge. We need to really link all of them on the first journal entry of the accrual and, of course, on the journal entry corresponding to the payment. And for those cases in which we use deferred payments or deferred installations, we also need to include each UUID per each transaction. No matter if we have 5 installments or 10 deferred payments, all of them have to be linked with this specific UUID or tax folio. We have more aspects to consider in this new Exhibit 24, and we already have the option of placing a seal on the delivery with a digital certificate. As we already explained, it is very important for us to verify if it is convenient or not to use this seal. And then it is important to note also that the same journal number with the key or number assigned by the taxpayer should not be repeated in the same month, which we already know we don't need to repeat this, but tax authorities are a little bit emphasized on this specific point. And then what happens when we have foreign invoices? For foreign invoices, they are also mandatory to be linked through the tax folios of those foreign receipts. So it is not mandatory just for Mexican electronic invoices, but also for foreign receipts. And as well, most of you may also be handling two-dimensional barcodes or CFD, not just only CFDI. So it is very important to include all those electronic or non-electronic receipts, all the way from two-dimensional barcodes, CFDs, foreign receipts, etc. In this respect, and as we already mentioned, we need to continue complying with our delivery characteristics consisting of the 5 elements, and for this specific case of the journal entries, the specific key that will be handled is the PL, of course, under a compressed file, and sent through the tax mailbox. And that will be an example of how our journal entry file will be named in conjunction with all of the 5 elements already mentioned. And Leo, could you please provide us with the next requirement?
Sure, thank you, Mariel. So the next requirement, it's in terms of the report of electronic invoices attached to journal entries. So what we can find in this new Exhibit 24, what we need to do here? Well, we need to comply with an XML file that we contain an auxiliary report or a report of folios of the electronic invoices that we are linking to the journal entries. This report needs to be submitted as part of the electronic accounting. So we basically need to submit an XML file, which is a report that will contain a list of all the folios of the electronic invoices that will link to the journal entries. And just like it is mentioned in this slide and in Exhibit 24, this report needs to be submitted because it is part of the electronic accounting. So this slide only mentions some considerations that are important to keep in mind. For example, the first one relates to the each receipt. The following is indicated: the identification data, the amount, the TIN, the payment method, the currency, and exchange rate. Additionally, the documentary support needs to be identified both on the accrual and in the payment, and or the collection of each of the accounts and sub-accounts that are affected. And just like Mariel was mentioned, this is very important because we need to make the identification or the link of each electronic folio to each accounting register. Whether if it is a journal entry, an accrual, a payment, we need to consider this. And it will be definitely create an administrative burden for all the taxpayers since it will be taking more time to link the electronic folio 2 times. One for the provision and another one for the payments. So additionally, something to keep in mind is that there is a standard for each type of receipt, for domestic, for foreign and domestic invoices. So once again, this is like the template of how the file will look like, the characteristics of the 5 elements. In here, the one that is changing, it is related to the key. So for this specific report, the XF will be the key that will identify this report. At the end, the file that will be sent to the government should look like this. And at the end, please remember that we need to send it by tax mailbox on a zip file.
Thank you very much for your insight, Leo. And moving on, we're going to describe a new report contained in this new Exhibit 24, which is the Information and Auxiliary Reports for Ledger Accounts and or First Level Subaccount. The considerations vary all the way from the registry date of the transaction affecting the account or subaccount, and as well we need to include the journal identification number. As we already mentioned, it has to be unique and non-repeatable in the same month. For our third point, we have the concept of the transaction integrating the report, and finally we have to identify the debit and the credit. As well, we have the delivery characteristics for this specific report, and the only difference here is that our key used would be XC. An example of how our file will look like is just as the one you're visualizing with the XC extension.
Thank you, Mariel. So basically, we're about to come to an end in our talk today, but before we finish, we'd like to talk a little bit about some general information in terms of electronic accounting. For example, once you have sent your electronic accounting information, you will receive a confirmation from the government, which will contain a similar electronic seal that the one you're visualizing right now. These seals mean that the electronic accounting has been sent to the government and they receive the information. However, we do not need to confuse that the information it's correct. That is a different thing. This only means that the government receives your information. So in case there is something that needs to be corrected, the government will notify you throughout this tax mailbox. But we wanted to put this slide just to show you how the receipt from the government, how it will look like. Something else that we can find on Exhibit 24 is it specifies a list of currencies and the codes that you will need to use for coding the currency in which the operation took place. So if you wish to receive a list of the currency from the government that they publish in the Exhibit 24, please send us an email and we'll be glad to send it to you as well. Additionally, something else that we can find on Exhibit 24, it's a list of bank institutions codes. So this means that when you are making your accounting registrations, if you make or process a payment through a Mexican bank, it will be coded with one grouping code. This way you need to make your registrations. So the government published the number of and the bank list for this. So again, if you wish to receive this list of banks that the government published, please send us an email and we'll be glad to send it to you as well.
Just one more thing, Leo. As we already know, we have the key 999, but we are not sure or certain of the criteria used for tax authorities in order to use this. Most of taxpayers may say, okay, for foreign currency or for foreign banks, in this specific case, we are going to use 999 key, but we are not quite sure of what criteria should be used at the moment, of course. And moving on, we have a very wide range of payment methods. And for us, it is quite impressive, and we are really surprised over this wide range of payment methods, varying all the way from transfer, cash, check, digital cards, credit cards, service, electronic cash cards, electronic money, property, and store vouchers. But SAT didn't let anything go away, because if you already see, we also have legal terms that refer to extension of obligations, which include relief, datation, and payment on account of a third party, offset, payment on consignation, payment under subrogation, cancellation, and of course, non-applicable and others. And now, what is going to happen with any computer errors? Well, tax authorities already foresaw this, and they provided facilities. In the first term, we can send as many times as necessary until they are accepted, but no later than the last day of the expiration of the corresponding obligation. And again, files sent and rejected by SAT authorities website portal within the 2 days prior to the expiration of the corresponding obligation may be resent within the 5 business days following the date the rejection is informed via the tax mailbox. And what is going to happen to those taxpayers that want to correct or cure their errors or omissions? Well, they have within the 5 business days following the date when the information is modified by the taxpayers. So we already know everything is handled in a very virtual manner, but still tax authorities are flexible and are open to these contingencies. So we already have these computer errors, and we already have the way in which we can handle this situation and work our best possible way.
So, well, thank you very much, Mariel, for this nice explanation so far. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the attention that you had paid as well. Well, now we have come to the last phase of this webinar, and we'll be considering some questions and answers. For this phase, we will be reading some of the questions submitted by you during the presentation, and we will try to answer them. However, we might not be able to read and answer them all due to the short time that we have left. But those questions that are not read and answered here, we will do it by email later on during the following days. So, Mariel, do you have? Can you start reading some of the questions that we have from our public, please?
Yeah, sure, Leo. Well, our first question is, what happens if I can't send the chart of accounts by internet?
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Mariel. So, in this case, if you do not have internet, unfortunately, that is not a reasonable answer for the government. So in this scenario, you will need to go directly to the offices of the government and physically deliver the chart of accounts in a CD or in a USB flash drive. So another question that I have here, Mariel, if you could help me with the answer of this one, is what happens if the tax folios, the UUID, are not registered in the month they correspond?
In this particular case, Leo, what we're going to do, and in accordance with the miscellaneous rules, they could be registered at the latest on the last natural day of the following month. And we have to retrieve all XML files from SAT's website portal, which we really and highly recommend you. And then moving on, we have our next question. In the event we have no tax receipt, how will we comply with the requirement of associating the journal entry with the tax folio?
Well, on these particular scenarios, when you do not have a tax receipt, then it's not necessary in these cases to link one for this. So another question that I have here, it reads, if there were no transactions during the month, must the trial balances be sent? Mariel, could you help me with this one, please?
Yes, of course. And yes, indeed, trial balances must be sent on a monthly basis, whether or not they have transactions. And these trial balances must include what? The initial balances, the period's transactions, and the final balances. And of course, they must be sent on an XML file. Okay, and then moving on, and a very frequently asked question we have is, how many complementary trial balances can be sent, Leo?
Thank you, Mariel. And I hope this is not a very, very frequent question because we don't pretend to be making a lot of changes to the trial balances, but fortunately, there is no limit number for sending complementary trial balance. We had spoke during the conversation or during the webcast that the first trial balance that you send will be considered as normal. And then the second, third, fourth, or as many other will be considered as complementary. So related, or to answer the question, how many times can we send the trial balance? It's unlimited. You can send it as many times as you need just to comply with the obligation. So another question that I have here, Mariel, can you help me with this one? It reads, when will the journal entries and auxiliary accounts must be sent?
Yes, well, and for journal entries and auxiliary accounts, they need to be sent when tax authorities only require them. And for the specific case of refunds, SAT authorities will be requesting them as of fiscal year 2015. And it's very important to keep in mind that what our primary obligation is to send chart of accounts and trial balances. And journal entries and auxiliary accounts go only for requirements. Then, how will the chart of accounts and trial balance will be sent, Leo?
Right. Well, in this case, the chart of accounts, the trial balance, everything related to electronic accounting will be sent throughout the website of the government. In this case, the website application that the government has issued for this is specified to the tax mailbox. Once you go there, specifically under the option of electronic accounting. Okay, we have only time for one more question. Mariel, could you help me with this one? And it reads, for the particular case of foreign invoices, how will they be associated on journal entries?
Well, according to new Exhibit 24, tax folios of the foreign invoice must be associated under journal entries, and said invoice must comply with the requirements provided by the miscellaneous rule 2.7.1.16.
Great. So, well, thank you very much, Mariel, for this nice explanation. So, everyone, I guess we ran out of time, and the session of question and answers has come to a conclusion. So, on behalf of GL Del Rio, Mariel and I want to thank you all for the attention and for taking the time to join us today in this session. So, we hope that it has met your expectations. And if later on you have some questions or some doubts, feel free to send us an email, and we'll be glad to help any way we can. We have been specializing ourselves in terms of electronic accounting to help our clients. So please feel free to send us an email, contact us if there is anything we can do to help you to comply with this new obligation. So once again, thank you all and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.